Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to deepen and defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney Flynn. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Catholic Mama. I am your host, Christine Mooney Flynn, and today I have a fun guest with us. Her name is Becca Dalrymple. She is a personal trainer with her business 1123 Fitness. I actually met Becca through my husband and fitness stuff. So this is cool that we can now bridge the gap between fitness and religion and spirituality. Hello, Becca.
Hi, Christine.
So thank you very much. I know Becca is on, you're on a different time zone than us. So thank you for, I don't know if you have coffee, but having coffee and getting up early enough to do this.
Oh, believe me, I've had plenty of coffee and it's not super early here. So it's all good.
That's right. It's only 9:15, right? You know, it's actually funny. I was going to say, I should know that because for whatever reason, my computer thinks that it lives in California. So the time is always Pacific. And yes. I can't change its mind. I've tried to reset it, and it always thinks that it lives in California. Maybe it feels at home there.
Well, California is pretty cool.
Yeah, you've been there for a little while now. You could go back to Minnesota at any moment, or no, never.
No. I mean,
the winters are probably better where you are now.
Yeah. No, I'm here, and I can't imagine like picking up and relocating anywhere really anytime soon. So I'm right.
Yeah. I saw a comment on one of your posts the other day. Somebody wanted to know if you were coming home. You're like, well, LA is my home now.
Yeah. Like I am home actually.
Man, yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, the Midwest is great. I actually really love the Midwest, but Minnesota winters scare me because I'm from the South and the most we have is like 11 degrees. That would be the worst we'd ever seen.
Well, they are definitely something to be frightened about. Definitely don't miss that. So luckily I also have like a bunch of my family in Washington State. So that's also a nice place to go to kind of get out of the LA heat.
Well, that's good. It's wet there, not snowy though, usually, right? I don't even know. I've never been there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it snows every once in a while, but yeah, it's usually drizzly and overcast. And that is what I really miss. I just really love rainy days and we don't get many of those here.
Yeah, I lived in California for a little bit, and I worked with a woman who was from, I think, Arkansas, and the two of us would reminisce about southern thunderstorms, because you weren't getting that in San Diego.
No, not at all.
The rain coming and all that, so yeah, I totally understand that. So for our listeners, like I said before, Becca and I met through my husband and his business. Becca came out to the Dragon Gym in Exton, Pennsylvania, a couple of months ago for a weekend event, and we got to talking, and we kept getting to talk, and with the Catholic Mama stuff online, we talked even more. And Becca, it was so wonderful to hear that this combination of the religious talk that we've been doing, and then all the fitness stuff, and this is all seeming to come together for you and pushing you closer to God, which is really, really cool to hear about. So I don't know if you said you had a funny story about what happened to you this morning. So why don't we start with that? Because that would be a good thing. I want to hear that.
Yeah. First of all, I mean, life is just amazing right now. And it's kind of like everything has just, it's always a process, but I feel like everything's just coming together. And every day I'm just more and more amazed with how God is working in life. But yeah, this morning, so of course I was like, nervous. I had really weird dreams the last 2 nights about, this recording and like just super random things that were happening in my dreams. And then I was excited, but nervous as well. Like, I just want to have the right words and all that. So I was over preparing. I mean, I sent you like pages of notes and things. And
that's really interesting. And I'm excited to actually talk about this stuff.
Well, and that was really cool for me to do, to get it down, because I hadn't ever really written down my story, kind of starting from the beginning, like taking an inventory of my own personal walk with God. So that was awesome for me to do. But so this morning I'm like still like nervous, and I like made my coffee, and I was like, I need to do more to prepare. So I like grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, and I had it all ready, and I set it down, and I was going to have my coffee, and I was going to start writing a bunch more notes. So I had something to reference just in case like I ran out of something to say. I don't know. So I set the paper down in a puddle of water that was left on the counter. So I'm like, okay, dry it off. Get it good to go. I'm writing down. It's all full of words. I had written all this stuff on it, just ideas and, inspiration. And I go and I bring my coffee over, and my coffee dumps all over it, completely ruins it. And it was like, God was like, okay, Becca, just stop.
Did it spontaneously burst in flames? It sounds like that would be the next step if it didn't.
That would have been the next step. Yeah. So I took it and I was like, okay, I threw it away. I was like, I hear you, God. Like, I'm trying to control things, right? Yeah. So I'm just trying to control this instead of just, okay, it's all good. It's just gonna be what it is. and I just stop and slow down and not try to control so much.
That is a great lesson, I think, in and of itself right there. That's the best lesson, especially for me. I like to control things, and I start to panic when I'm not in control, which is ridiculous because I personally have, 3 kids and Pat and a Saint Bernard, and just nothing is under my control.
Nothing. And when we finally surrender to that, it's a lot easier.
Well, then we can have a nice conversation, or sort of easier. Yes. Yes. Easier. I guess if you truly believe it, then it's easier. If you just are trying to believe it and failing at that, then it might be a little more stressful.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean not to prepare at all and just wing it. Right. No. But it just means try not to write down a gazillion notes. And
I think it's like, don't get too attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
And then the pressure's off. I mean, you still prepare and do everything that you can to get ready, but to have that like tight grip on the end result, I think that's where we get ourselves into a state of fear and anxiety and panic and control and all of that negative. And then you're kind of running on that.
Rather than the journey itself and going through. That's good. Yeah. There you go. We're done. You taught us enough.
Boom, right there.
That's good. Everybody pause for the podcast for a second and think about that, because that's a really good lesson. So yeah, but the notes you sent over were really interesting, and it's and when you just mentioned taking an inventory, I think that's another awesome thing that I want to stop on for a second, because how it's probably pretty rare to actually have to stop and think about your faith life and where it started and how it's gone and where you are today. And it's interesting to see, like, you kind of bounce back and forth to almost being ready for it and then leaving it, and almost being ready for it again and then leaving. But I don't know, without this intense look back over the past however many years that you would have seen that otherwise. It's good to take that inventory.
It was really interesting. It's far from a straight line to the finish.
Right. Pat loves this phrase, God can write straight with crooked lines. He said, I don't know who said it, so I can't, I'm afraid I don't have great internet reception, so I'm afraid to go look for it and then somehow cut our recording off. But whoever said that, I can't give Pat credit, because he definitely didn't, but my husband, Pat, right? So, but I think that's a great one, because it doesn't matter how it's the journey along. And when you look back, there can be a lot of good things. Like for me personally, we'll get into your story in just a second, and then I'll stop talking. I can look back and see, oh God, well, why did I make all those mistakes? But at the same time, now that I know that I've made all these mistakes and thought all these different things and believed all these various beliefs, now I know that the faith I currently have is unshakable. Mm-hmm. So I already did all the other stuff. Yes. And I wound up here. So that's enough about me, though, because I've talked about my conversion story a few times. Let's talk about you, because I'm really excited to hear about this. This is such an unexpected, awesome thing to hear, that suddenly you've really started to feel like you found, or you came home. So why don't we start? Yeah, Let's, you said before that you didn't really have a religious upbringing, correct?
I had pretty much no religious upbringing, and the little bits and pieces that I did hear mentioned were negative, for sure. So if anything, I kind of had a bad, almost a fear, a really uncomfortable feeling about all things God, religion, all of it.
Yeah. And then, so I had the same, a very similar type upbringing. And I just said for the longest time, I also grew up in the Bible Belt. So I was hearing a lot of rapture stuff. And it was like, slumber parties would devolve into shouting matches of who would become a slave of Satan. I was like, ooh, I don't want to do anything with this.
I know, it's scary. And I grew up in Wisconsin, and all of my friends, it's a big Lutheran population there.
Yep.
So all of my friends had to go to Sunday school on Sundays. And I just thought that I was so cool that I didn't have to do that. And I could, go to the pool or whatever instead of Sunday school. And, my mom always kind of jokingly referred to herself as a recovering Catholic. I had no idea what that meant, but I knew that it wasn't good. And I heard stories about, the nuns in the schools and the rules and the strictness. And I was like, that sounds like terrible. And then my dad was, just pretty much outright a non-believer. God doesn't exist. So those were my two, and we never went to church. The first time I was ever even in church for any type of service was when I was in 6th grade for a wedding. And I'm sorry, but it was a Catholic service and it was so boring. And so everything, it's like I had this idea that it was really weird and out there and uncomfortable and scary and not good. And then kind of everything along the way sort of just reinforced that idea.
Right. Yeah. If you have these not great experiences at the start, why would you think otherwise?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
and
totally
I
there with you.
Saw, as I started to get older and a little more conscious about what was going on, I saw, people that had kids that were raising their kids within a certain religion. And I really was judgmental against that. I was like, how can the parents do that to their kids? How can they just sort of brainwash them, basically? I felt pretty harshly about all of this. How can they brainwash them? These kids don't even have a choice, and I felt like I was so lucky that I didn't. And in a way, it's cool because later on, I got to choose for myself what I wanted. But I thought that I was just so much better because I didn't have all these rules. It felt really heavy and I didn't want that. So I felt like I was free.
Yes, it's the exact opposite though. Once you've come around to it, though, I think.
Yes, and then exactly, and then as soon as my life kind of started slowly spinning out of control, I realized that freedom was the exact opposite thing of what I thought it was. Yesterday, I was talking with my sister-in-law, and she said something that's really interesting. In her church, the pastor just kind of took a quick survey of everyone and said, okay, anyone who was saved, when they were a kid, like under the age of 10, raise your hand. So some people raise their hands. How about people in their 20s, saved in your 30s, saved in your 40s, saved in your 50s? And the older that they got, the fewer and fewer hands went up because, our hearts get hardened as we get older. And, I was reading in Moses about the stiff-necked people, and this, is just really, it's so good. I feel so blessed that at the age of, I think it was like right around when I was 35, I'm 42 now, that I really fully opened my heart to God. And that's a miracle because I am seriously like the most unlikely person to be talking about this right now. It's hilarious.
So I know that your mom had passed away. Does your dad, how does he feel about your conversion? Does he know?
I just definitely got tears in my eyes right now. I don't talk to my dad a lot. So we actually haven't talked about it. Yeah. And, my mom died a little over a year ago, and that still obviously really affects me, and was also a big turning point for me with my faith. And actually, I moved away from God for a while because I was so angry.
Sure.
But even when you do that, God still works in your life. And, we can, if you're not feeling close to God, it's not because God went anywhere. right? I love that.
Yeah, that's great.
He's right there all the time. So
yeah, I was curious about this because my own dad is agnostic. He was raised Catholic, but then it was a little too much pressure, intensity, the rules, and getting hit by the nuns in school. He was pre-Vatican II and a lot of this stuff, so he had a much different Catholic experience than, say, kids these days would, or I would. So yeah. I when I told him, it was weeks that I was thinking, like, how am I going to tell my dad this? Like, it was the most. Telling him that I had done something unspeakable seems like it would have been easier than telling him I was converting. So I was just curious, knowing that your dad was definitely a non-believer. I was just sweating bullets, and I was writing notes, and I'm thinking how the best way to approach this. I really overthought it.
No, I don't have that. Like, I don't feel like I have to kind of come out to, my dad, like, in that way. But he does know that I'm a believer, and his wife, my stepmom, is also a believer. So I have had, lots of conversations with her about it. So, they do know. But it would be, that's actually good. You just planted a seed, because it would be good for me to have a conversation with my dad about this, because I'm not really exactly sure where he is right now with his spirituality.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You never know. Yeah, but maybe he'd be one of the few that'd be more open now in his older age. Who knows? You never know with people where they're going to be.
Sometimes we get hardened, and sometimes we get softened, I guess, right?
Yeah, I guess it just depends. Who knows how what cards life is dealt, or how you feel, or whatever. The Holy Spirit working within you.
I think it's 100% how you feel, because life is going to deal what it deals, but it's really what is going on inside that will determine, everything.
Yeah. And if God wants to open, he can give you a little push. So when you said 7 years ago, when you opened yourself up to God, what happened there? Because if you were coming from this background, it was like definitely against it. And I was the same way. I thought, those poor saps, it must be nice for them to be so ignorant and foolish to be able to have faith, blah, blah.
Yes.
So exactly. I'm curious, what happened?
So when I was writing all of my notes, there was this theme that I kind of highlighted for you at the beginning of my notes, and I can't remember exactly how I worded it, but I liked him, so I reluctantly agreed. One of the problems in my life has been relationships. And so I've had a lot of boyfriends, and I guess it first happened with one of my boyfriends, and he asked me to go to church with him, and I liked him, so I reluctantly agreed. And that was almost 10 years ago, I guess. No, less than that. Yeah, 7 years ago. And it was a non-denominational Christian church, and something just happened during the praise and worship where I started crying, and I didn't know why, but I knew that there was something big going on. Like, the lyrics to the song, I felt like were speaking directly to me. I was hearing in the lyrics something said that I had never really heard before, and for the first time I was like, oh, like, other people feel this way, like this. I felt like I had this emptiness and this hole inside me and all of this pain, and for the first time I was connecting with something that was similar. And
then what happened after? Did you start going to church regularly? Where did you go from there?
It was a big enough experience for me to know, okay, there's something up with this. I need to investigate this more. I didn't jump full in right away, but I kind of started dipping my toes in the water. So I went to, church. It was a big part of his life. So I also made it a part of my life, which is something that I tended to do a lot, is kind of mold myself into what other people were, or what other people wanted me to be. I try not to do that anymore. That's something that I've been working on. But anyway, so yeah, I kind of tested out the waters, and it just started presenting itself in different ways. And I guess it was a slow process, and it took a couple years before I really accepted Jesus into my life. And it was probably 2 or 3 years after that initial experience in church where I was baptized for the first time and fully accepted God. But now, hindsight's 2020. So now, even looking back on that, I said that I was accepting, Jesus into my life 100%, but I didn't walk the walk.
Okay.
So now, after some more time has passed, I'm actually walking the walk. I'm trying to.
What parts were you struggling with?
I was still on my own agenda. Basically, I was taking the things that were convenient, and I was doing those, and then the things that I knew in my heart that God was asking me to do, things to let go of, the things that I didn't want to let go of, that I was scared to let go of, or that were really uncomfortable, and I felt like were too big to do. I was just not doing those things. So I was still just kind of operating under my own power and my own ideas of what I should be doing, instead of really listening to God and doing what He wants me to do.
I'm going to say, if what you're doing now is just maybe over preparing for something, and that's all God has to remind you to stop doing, that's not bad. You come a long way, it sounds like.
I do. I feel like I've come a long way. And my life right now is just the most peaceful it has ever been. And I look back on, not even that long ago, like a couple months ago, and I was so uncomfortable, Christine. I was just always uncomfortable. And that's because it all has to do with my level of, the level that I love myself, right? So the higher that is, the more that is reflected on the outside. So I didn't think that highly of myself for most of my life. And so that was reflected on the outside. So when you're kind of in that conflict, life is really uncomfortable. And that's how it was for most of my life.
So then you said a couple of months ago, what switched there?
Actually, it's the strangest things that kind of like make, big shifts in our lives, right? But I joined the keto reset that your husband and you put on through Strong On. So I just knew it was time to I did it as a way to kind of tighten up my diet. Things were getting a little bit out of control, and I felt like I needed something to follow, like a plan to follow. So I joined the 2-week program, and I cut out a lot of extra food, and it's a pretty strict eating program, as you know. Mm-hmm. And I also cut out alcohol. And when I did all that, it kind of stripped down everything. And there was a huge shift. There was a huge shift physically. Like I physically lost about 10 pounds in like a little over a week. It was pretty ridiculous. And then there was a gigantic shift in the spiritual realm for me. Like it really just opened things up and made me realize that I was done with the things that I was still doing that weren't serving me anymore. Like I was just done. So I made a lot of changes in my life, like right after that.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I gotta say, you're not the only person to have said how much that reset kind of lifted the veil of what they were doing that they didn't need to do, yet they were still doing anyway. And for the first time in, ever or a long time, they were able to see these habits that they had, grown accustomed to that really weren't that healthy. So just for our listeners real quick, the keto reset is something that my husband did with the Chronicles of Strength and Strong On. It was this 2-week diet and exercise program, kind of loosely following the ketogenic diet. So like high fat and moderate protein and low carb. And I think what it's neat to see, at least from my perspective, because I've done the keto diet myself a few times, is that you're still, you don't feel deprived really, because the high fat content kind of, keeps you going after that initial fog over the first couple days. So suddenly you can see that you can still be satiated without all this extraneous stuff that you kind of come to. So whether it's the wine at the end of the day or the ice cream or, eating 6 times a day to keep your metabolism fires burning or whatever the jargon is. So it really gives you the time and the space to kind of step back. And
Space,
see,
like the word. Yeah. Like I feel like it opened up the space in my life that I needed, by having like a very set eating schedule and not having to consume. I was so consumed all the time with, what I'm going to eat and what I'm going to make. And it just consumed so much of my brain. And when all of that was taken away, it opened up a lot of time in my day and a lot of space in my heart for, the things that, I was really needing to have, a place, like they could now fit into that because I wasn't being consumed by all of this extra stuff.
Yeah. I've heard it said that no matter what, you're going to have a religion. The religion that you have could actually be an actual religion, or it could be politics, or it could be exercise or diet. No matter what, you're going to have a religion. So it seems like for you, and I've heard for other people as well throughout this, I'm not going to say this is the majority of people, but a few people have come forward and said this was, I think it reoriented them a little bit and showed that the religion didn't need to be the diet and exercise. There was space to go with what was more meaningful.
Yes, there was space.
So what and then now you were just baptized again, correct?
I was just baptized again. I guess it was a week ago.
Congratulations.
So it took me, thank you. Yeah. Since I've been in LA, I finally just found my church home. So that happened maybe 6 weeks ago. I found a church that I love, and I just felt like it was time to reaffirm my faith. And I had a great church family in Minnesota, but it was time to rededicate myself, I guess, to my church family here. So I did that on Sunday, and yeah, that's why I got baptized.
That's wonderful. Now committed anew.
It was such a powerful day. I think I cried like all day. I walked into church and I just instantly started crying. And my family, they were watching it live when they were, all my nieces and nephews in Washington, they were watching it, the live streaming. And I guess after they saw me get baptized, the 3 of my nieces said that they wanted to get baptized because they had seen me do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Today's reading in the Catholic Church was about being shepherd, and I wish I could remember the readings. I know it was from Jeremiah. I know I could look this up. I'm so afraid. My internet connection. I'm currently at my aunt's house on vacation visiting my family, and the internet connection isn't great. So I'm just winging this by memory. But the readings today all centered around, Christ being the ultimate shepherd, but then all of us in our lives having the opportunity to be shepherds of our faith as well, and going forth and making sure that we're good shepherds, whether that is what we say on Facebook or what we blog about, or how we just interact with people out and about. So that's really cool that sense as being fresh on my mind. That's really cool to hear that you've just become a good shepherd for your family members. Well, now
that's like one of the main things that I was trying to say earlier about how I wasn't really walking God's path before. And part of that was I wasn't being a shepherd. I was keeping it to myself. I was like, this doesn't have to do with anybody else. This is just my relationship with God, and that's it. And nobody else needs to hear about it. But really not what it's about. Like, as a believer, like, I have an obligation. My pastor last week talked about being on assignment, and how every day, like, we are walking in God's assignment. And part of that assignment is to, spread the word. And so I stopped editing myself. I I'm not afraid anymore, which is hard because, I mean, if you look at how I grew up, I was literally afraid of religion and afraid of God, and it made me very uncomfortable. So now I just try to, unapologetically, talk about things openly and not worry about like if they're going to make people uncomfortable, like it used to make me uncomfortable.
Yes, I completely understand that. Even, there is like this, and he's like saying, I'm going to pray for you or whatever. That if anybody had said that to me years ago, I'd be like, ugh, no thanks.
Yeah.
I'm good. You keep that over there. But it sounds like I am totally understanding all this because it sounds like the exact about face, and it's really surprising to see that in yourself.
And I'm not standing on the corner in North Hollywood with a megaphone either. Like that's not what it's about. I think it's a combination of just letting God's light shine through me so that other people see that. That's like mostly what it is, right? Mm-hmm. And then just not being afraid to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you're not afraid to talk about it here. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, it's such a big part of me, and it's like it's what I base my life on. So it's huge.
So now that you've, just got baptized again, you found your church home, is there, what's next in your spiritual journey? Any ideas of what you'll be doing?
In my spiritual journeys, I'm not sure. I mean, right now I'm reading the Bible in 90 days, and I've never read the entire Bible. I've read very little of it, in fact, and I've attempted to read it many times. So I've read the first half of Genesis, a bunch of times. So that, I know that's a big part of my journey right now. It's bringing up a lot. I had a really interesting experience trying to get through Leviticus. Like I had a full on meltdown sob fest. They talk about it as, the Bible is the living word. And I understand what that means now, because wherever you are in your life, it's going to meet you there. And it met me in some, in a very dark place. I have some, it brought out some darkness inside me. So part of my journey right now is the next, 90 days reading the Bible, and who knows what is going to happen with that. But
it's very ambitious.
Yeah. And you know what? It's pretty amazing because I am still on schedule. It's been 2 weeks and I'm still on schedule. I'm doing this with my sister-in-law too. So it's fun to have a partner in crime. And all we do is text back and forth about the Bible. It's great. But if I wouldn't, and this is another thing, like the keto, like I would have never had space in my life to read the Bible. When I was doing all these things that were distracting me with, snacking and eating and drinking, I would just kind of go throughout the day and do the things that need to get done, and then fall into bed at the end of the day, usually like buzzed from, a few glasses of wine. And I wasn't, I can't read the Bible when I'm living my life like that. So it's a miracle for sure.
That's wonderful. I love the fact that you have an accountability buddy with this too. I mean, it works no matter, we talk about it a lot in fitness, but it really works no matter what. Actually, right now, my friend Alex Salkin, he is, he lived with me and Pat for a little while. And that's when he was living with us is when I started to read Genesis. I decided I was going to read the Bible. And so it was really cool at first because he's Jewish. I would be able to ask him questions about the Old Testament, and he would be able to give me answers. And I had this built-in study partner.
Nice.
And he's like, oh God, I got to get back to it. Now for him to read his text, it's in Hebrew, and then he has to translate it then into English. So it's way harder for him to get through this. But now I'm his accountability buddy, and every night I get a message from him saying like a one sentence summary of what he read that day. But he has to do a lot more work, but it's keeping him on track. He said at first he just wanted to get through one of the books, It was going to, you want to do it in 21 days. And then at the end of the 21 days, he's like, this is working really well. Can I just keep messaging you every night? I was like, yeah, that's fine. So I get this, and it's good for me too, because I have already read the books that he's now reading. So I get a reminder of what all those were. But he's in Numbers now. So we made it through, oh gosh. Yep. Yeah. So it's been cool to see that Leviticus. Yeah. that's so interesting to hear that you were really touched by Leviticus, which I think is more meaningful knowing the New Testament, to see those two things, to go back and forth between the two, really brings the New Testament to light even more.
It does. And I should call Alex, because I have so many questions.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's great.
Reading is for sure bringing up more questions than it is giving me answers. I have a bazillion questions.
Do you have a study Bible? Are you using a study Bible for this?
No, I'm just using my what version do I have? NIV, New International Version. Yeah. So when you're trying to read the Bible in 90 days, you're not really getting deep into any one part of it.
Sure.
My sister-in-law referred to it as flying over the United States in an airplane. You kind of get the full general view of it, right? So that's what I'm doing. I'm not trying to overthink, and I tend to do that. I'll look up a few things if I'm really confused, or but other than that, I'm just trying to get a feel for it. And then I know that I'll read it again, and it'll be probably a completely different experience.
Yes, absolutely. That'll be cool to see. And then you can always go deeper into one area later on that you really feel like you need to. Yeah. That's very admirable. I'm excited to hear how this journey goes over the next day. What, 83 days left?
Something like that. And they give us 2 grace days. So I get 2 days where I don't have to read at all. So I don't know. I might finish it in 88 days if I, don't take any of my grace days.
That's awesome. Well, that's very cool. Thank you so much for sharing this. I think it is really interesting to hear people who definitely were adverse to all of this and then suddenly come around to it. And it really shows that, like you said, God's always there. It's whether or not we're there with him, or opening ourselves to be there with him. So it seems like the Holy Spirit moved through you really strongly over the past few years. And this is awesome to hear.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not any different than anyone else. I mean, he worked in my heart, just like he works in everyone's heart. So it doesn't matter what's going on with you or what's going on with your life or where you are with, as far as believing, he's still at work in your heart.
Amen. Amen. That just means, I didn't realize amen just meant yes. So amen. Amen. Lots of yeses to that.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Becca. You can find Becca. She has, actually I should mention this. So I was just asking about your website, 1123fitness.com. 1123. Can you tell everybody what that refers to?
Yeah. When I first created my business a year or so before I moved to LA, I knew that, I had this goal of moving to LA and being a personal trainer. And that sounded absolutely impossible to me, right? I knew that it was something that I couldn't just do on my own. I was going to need God's help. So I named my business 1123 Fitness based on the Bible verse Mark 11:23. And I told you before that I had it memorized, but now that I'm like on the spot, I hope I don't mess it up. But here's what I think it says. Truly, I tell you, if you say to the mountain, go throw yourself into the ocean, if you believe it will happen, it shall be done for you. And so that to me just means, there are going to be obstacles, but with faith and with belief and with God's help, those obstacles will get out of the way.
That's awesome. And now I know another Bible verse, even though I've read Mark and I don't remember that one. Thank you again, Becca. And I'll put in the show notes on the podcast. So I'll put in the 1123 Fitness URL if people want to go check you out. And I appreciate it again for you to come on and tell your story. This has been great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Don't forget to head over to thecatholicmama.com to get your free copy of How to Talk to Your Kids About God. This handy little ebook will teach you how to broach the topic of God with your children, or how to respond to your kids when they want to talk about God, as well as give you answers to 7 of the trickiest questions about the faith that Christian parents face. You'll love the easy-to-understand grown-up answers, the pared-down but not talked-down answers you can share with your kids, plus recommended resources if you'd like to deepen your understanding of the topic. Yours free at thecatholicmama.com.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.